Hi, I'm Dr. Siri Chand, and I'm excited to invite you into the kitchen today. We're going to be making a pinto bean kale rosemary potato soup. It's really yummy and it has all the ingredients from my fresh recent farmer's market box. But before we do that, we're going to do a mindful minute. So just take a second to get comfortable, notice your breathing. If you're on a sofa, on a desk chair, in your bed, wherever you are, just notice any part of your posture or position that's not comfortable. And now just pay attention to your breathing. And as you're doing that, I want you to inhale deeply and exhale deeply. Noticing any sounds in your background, incorporating them in, and just being present with the breath, inhaling and exhaling. Okay, so I'll have you set an intention for our time together, and I'm going to get started making this really fun dish with you. So this week in our farm box, we got these gorgeous pinto beans, and if you've never seen them before, they have this beautiful kind of pink and gold color, just exactly almost colors that I love. And I wanted to share with you a little bit about logistics of beans. So a lot of people have dry goods right now just for the sake of preservation and accessibility, and they're not totally sure how to cook beans. So first step is to kind of pick out whatever bean you're going to be cooking with, and the next step is to soak them. And soaking is something that is kind of personal. I tend to soak mine in the fridge overnight, and I make sure there's at least 3 inches of water above the surface. So if it was in a bowl, 3 inches above in that. If it's in this measuring cup, 3 inches above. And so you can see there's quite a bit of expansion that's taking place overnight. And then in the interest of time, and the way that I do it is I actually throw out the soaking liquid. And one of the benefits that comes through soaking is slower cooking time, as well as some of these anti-nutrients that plants have that may prohibit us from absorbing minerals, like phytates, are being soaked out if we soak them overnight. It may also help with digestibility, and we can talk a little bit about that when it comes to cooking. Cooking is the last part, and it just sort of varies in terms of cooking time. I like to say that everyone sort of has a different threshold for when the beans taste good or what dish you're using it in. But for me, I like beans a little softer. So these pinto beans went into the slow cooker, not the pressure cooker, but the slow cooker for about 3 hours on high. And there's some prevailing wisdom that holding off till you're done cooking the beans to add spices is generally beneficial to the flavor and to the texture. And we do sometimes add kombu, which is a seaweed, which helps in the digestibility as well. And I'll provide some more scientific information about that in the links below the video. So at any rate, so we've got, and it just kind of varies in terms of amount of dry legume to cooked. I think for pintos, let's take a look here. I have a little list. 1 cup usually tends to make about 2.5 cups. So that could be, approximately what we've got here. And again, every batch, every process is going to be a little bit different, but you can see here dried, soaked, and then cooked. So what we're going to make today, and I'm really excited about it because it's using a lot of the ingredients from the farm box, is a white bean, or a pinto bean and kale or greens, and you can use any greens for the greens portion of this, but this is Swiss chard and sort of a red curly kale. So the first thing I've done is I've already chopped up some onion and a little bit of garlic, and now I'm going to just add a tiny bit of ginger. And today we're going to use a technique called water saute, and by no means am I an expert, but we're just going to throw that in with a little bit of broth. And the reason for that is that we're kind of trying to do an oil-free recipe here. So just slicing this into manageable bites. All right. And I'm going to put a little bit of this gorgeous, super fragrant rosemary in, and we're going to add some a little bit more as we go along. And the way that I utilize rosemary in the kitchen is I just reach from the top and hold tight, and I just kind of pull as I go down, and then we have the leaves separated from the sort of more woody bark portion of the plant. So, okay, so we're going to throw all this into a pot, and while this sautés, I'm going to fill you in on beans a little bit more. So, give me a second off camera here. And I'm going to put this on a medium to low heat. I have a gas stove. So you'll hear that fire up, and I have a broth that I've pre-made that I'm just going to utilize. I'm going to pour a little bit of that in, and a little bit of salt, and a little bit of ground cumin, and the rosemary. And here we go. So we're going to start that saute process, and then while that's going, I'm going to just kind of finish prepping the potatoes and the greens. So let's get this kind of set up here. Always making a mess here in the kitchen. But there's so many different ways to sort of add flavor and nutrients to any dish you make. I kind of like little potato slices, but you can make them into cubes. There's something about texture and flavor for me, the way the potatoes kind of come across here as little half moons almost. Again, no right or wrong. Depends on your potato size. You may want to do another slice down the middle. And you can hear that saute process is sort of going. And there we are. So the potato, I'm going to do 2 potatoes for this, and again, that's partly because we just love the taste of potatoes in our house. So potatoes are a resistant starch, and some people have some sensitivity to them, but we don't find that to be so often the case for us, so we incorporate them quite a bit. You could do a grain with this dish, barley, millet, you could add rice, you could do no grain. There's a lot of options. So. All right, and the next ingredient we're going to put in, and you can see it's going to take us about 5 minutes to do all the prep work for this soup. So this is definitely something that can be done very quickly. And I'm just going to get the woodier stems off of the greens. Then I'm going to kind of roll them up and cook them, or actually slice them. So here we go. And here we go. And you can save all these wonderful ends and bits to make your broths with, which is what the broth that I'm going to show you here in a second that we're going to be using for this soup. And again, I'm not sure this is the right way, but this is the way I do it. So I sort of roll it all up. This is a sort of translation of French technique for fresh herbs, but I just roll them up and slice it thinly just like this, and then I'll slice it once down the middle again. And partly this is just in the interest of time. I want to get this meal moving as soon as I walk through the door if I'm hungry. It can also be something you throw in into the slow cooker in the morning when you're sort of headed out. So there you can see we've got all the vegetable prep, and you could add carrots to this, you could add rutabaga, parsnip. There's a lot of options actually in terms of the vegetables that go in. And we've got this over here sauteing. And I'm just going to stir it up a bit. And you can see that the slowly the onions are starting to become a little bit more translucent, which is basically all that we're looking for. And I'm going to just throw that back on the stove like this. And a little bit more broth. You're going to want to keep an eye on that. I usually start with about 2 tablespoons. And then the next piece is I'm going to go ahead and drain off the extra liquid off of this, and we'll be using this as the base for our soup, adding all these wonderfully fresh cooked pinto beans. And these again are straight from my slow cooker. So once we have all these ingredients together, it's a really easy soup. It can go into the slow cooker, it can go into your pressure cooker if you only had a few minutes, or you can just do it over the stove while you maybe are getting other things ready. And we've got this water sauteing. So like I said, we're just softening these onions, reducing some of their pungency. And you can see it's gotten a little bit more translucent. And we'll just let that go just a little bit more before we add all these ingredients to that. And again, this is something you can kind of flavor in a way that appeals to you. I'm using rosemary, but you could use thyme, you could add some lemon juice, you could add coriander. Again, it's sort of what spices you have affinity to. And this is about 2 cups of cooked greens and about 2 cups of potatoes. The greens will cook down quite a bit, so you could actually do more. So this is Swiss chard and kale, but you could do spinach, Swiss chard, kale, kind of a whole combination, whatever is exciting and whatever's in your kitchen. And don't forget that there's a little bit of ginger in there. But again, this is a super flexible recipe. And usually I'll do the salting more towards the end of the dish in terms of flavor, because I want to see how all those flavors are going to combine while they're cooking. So coming back to just a little bit of information about legumes, they're part of the family that includes beans, lentils, soybeans, peas, peanuts, and even alfalfa and clover. And in terms of their digestibility, it kind of varies on each person. But I have found that some people really do better to soak and cook their own beans than to take them out of a can. But there's nothing wrong with getting them from a can as long as they're BPA free. Another important factor is whether or not how long you're going to store your beans. So there's some studies that show that the peak nutrient pieces sort of start to dwindle after about 4 months. So that's another piece to think about. So I usually say no more than a year. So if you've got some legumes stockpiled, now's the time. The other thing is, I don't know if you've ever done this, but they have some mixes out there that are 7-bean soups, and that's a little bit troubling for me because I put all that in the crock pot and I don't soak it and I don't cook it maybe long enough, and it can be a real sort of digestive nightmare. So again, sometimes I sort of go more with single beans in terms of cooking and preparing. And the last kind of point I wanted to share with you is that there are some beans that don't need as much intensive prep work, and I would put into that category mung beans, lentils, those small kind of legumes that cook so quickly over the stove. So we make a lot of khichdi and dal, and those are great options to do with the smaller legumes. They don't need soaking, they don't need sprouting, so to speak, and so we've had pretty good luck with that. So you can see here our onions are a little bit more translucent, and we've done what we call this water saute. So I'm going to go ahead and take this opportunity to put everything else in. And so here we go. So in goes the potatoes. And again, this is sort of one pot cooking. Nice soup with a wonderful sourdough bread. Oh my gosh. I'm getting excited thinking about it. Gonna throw in these legumes here, the pinto beans from Maya's farm. We have her rosemary, we have her fresh, beautiful Swiss chard. And then this is about 4 cups of broth. And this is from what I call freezer broth or leftover broth. So these guys kind of go in the crock pot or the slow cooker overnight, and it makes this wonderful broth. It's low in salt, so if you're going salt-free, fat-free. Now that we've got everything in the pan, we're going to have some fun letting it cook for a while, and we'll show you the finished product. But right now in the pan, we've got kale, Swiss chard, white potatoes, pinto beans, rosemary, cumin, and salt, and a little bit of pepper. So here it goes. Okay, welcome back. So we've had it in the slow cooker for about an hour. And we have this gorgeous soup that we're gonna have for dinner, and super healthy, very tasty. And you can have this with some really yummy warm sourdough bread or flaxseed crackers. It's going to be very nourishing and filled with the things that your body needs to kind of function well. So we have the pinto beans, the rosemary, the potatoes, the cooked greens. It all makes for this really delicious combination. And even if it isn't the bright, vibrant green, the vegetables are still adding a lot of delicious components and flavors. So hope you enjoy this and let me know any variations you end up making. Okay, thanks. See you next time.